This evening, we have a report and presentation, which is an analysis of the data regarding later school start times as it affects the East Brunswick school system. As many of you may recall, that was out of a group of parents, started with a group of parents who were concerned about data that indicated that there might be a benefit to starting school later. And so the school board was asked to take that under consideration. We have done so. We've asked our own administrators to look into our data as it reflects from the standpoint of students in our school district, and that's what Dr. Valesky and Ms. Warren will be talking to us about this evening.
Thanks, Dr. Cohen. As Dr. Cohen said, we've been working on this since July in investigating these start times. So I'd like, first of all, to thank the following individuals who really helped us with this study. Of course, Mrs. Beth Warren, who's been my constant companion through this project. Also in the audience, Mrs. Karen Familetti and Ms. Diana Wong, also parents that helped us. Joyce Forsberg, Jen Carter here at the district, Dr. Michael Vanella, Mr. Mark Suter, and Dr. Michael Gaskell, all administrators here in the district. So really what we wanted to do was take a look at the studies that were being published that were professing support for later start times at secondary schools, that more sleep, later start times equated to better performance. So we wanted to take a look at how that impacted students here at East Brunswick School District, or East Brunswick Public Schools. So what we did, the context of this is really a review of those studies, the history behind the current EBPS school start schedules, our broad district achievement data, an analysis of the school district's academic performance, looking at early performance, those students who are in the first period versus their peers in later periods of the day, the logistical impact of adjusting start times, specifically for the secondary schools, and the potential for financial impact associated with adjusting the school start times. So a little history. The current start times really date back to the late 1970s, and it was pretty much a reaction to the growth of the district at that time, not unusual among districts during that period of time. And the district struggled with that growth. And so as a method of economy, start times were adjusted so that students could be transported appropriately with the limited number of transportation resources, because we had buses that were doubling up and actually transporting students to multiple schools from the same attendance area. So it was a concern of efficiency and also making sure that students weren't on the bus for extended periods of time. Out of that, though, grew probably a greater issue is that because of the earlier start times of the secondary schools, specifically the high school and the junior high school, parents came to rely on older sibling childcare. Their early start times meant early dismissal times, so older siblings were home to receive their younger siblings for parents who worked outside the home. So one of the things that we wanted to do is really, in the first part of this, is just give you a broad brush of what East Brunswick has looked like over the last 4 or 5 years, and specifically over the last year in terms of academic performance. And you know well that the district is extremely proud of its graduation rate. We're currently at 98.5%. And we wanted to look at some other things beyond just graduation rate. So we took a sample of the combined SAT average, and this is a 5-year look. But you can see that we are above the national average of 1,500, and even though we had a slight dip in 2012 and 13, we're pretty much on trend in 2014 for preceding years 2010, 2011. We also wanted to take a look at the high school HESPA results as a 4-year look. But what is very significant about this, in 2014, look at the gains for both mathematics and language arts among our student population for advanced proficiency, which is in the blue column for 2014. 49% of our students were advanced proficient in mathematics, 52% were advanced proficient in language arts. Also significant is students who sit for the AP exams. And off to the right, you'll notice that the average passing percentage in New Jersey is 75% of the students who sit for the exam pass the AP exam. Last year, 95% of our students were successful in earning college credit by passing the AP exam. 1,184 exams were administered with 3,552 equivalent college credits earned as a result of that passage, up from the preceding years. So our students tend to be a very, very good, high-quality, high-achieving group of individuals. But what we really wanted to look at now was what's the impact among East Brunswick students if you take a look at peer groups, those that attend class first period and those that attend a similar class maybe later in the day. So we looked at first period and fourth period. And we looked at some very strong academic areas, which would be math and English. Our first look is here at math. So this is a comparison over 4 years of how students performed in period 1 and period 4. The blue is period 1. And so you notice that 38% and 36% respectively achieved either an A or a B in period 1 math. Their counterparts in period 4 were still doing pretty consistent. 38% got an A, but only 34% got a B. And look at the number of students that actually got a C or less, period 1 versus period 4. Only 17% were in period 1 got a C, where 19% of their peers got a C in period 4. Not statistically significant, but there is a general theme here. The next look we wanted to look was English. Whoops, our English slide seems to have disappeared.
It disappeared.
Well, I will tell you that the English grades over a 4-year look, the same comparison, we had 40% of the students achieve an A in first period, 40% achieved an A, a B in first period, 36% received an A in fourth period, and 37% received a B in fourth period. So again, the students in English actually outperformed, first period students outperformed their fourth period counterparts in English. So 2 observations from this: the grade distribution is relatively consistent, but we did have slightly more students in first period earn A's than we did in fourth period. So we want to take another look, and this is actually with input from our parent constituents, is looking at cohorts of students. So we took a look at 6 groups of students. Now these are roughly cohorts of 40 students each. So this is the same group of students moving from 7th grade Hammersholt to 8th grade Churchill. So if you follow the coloring, you start from the top, the dark blue, period 1. Those are students in Hammersholt in 2010, 2011, 7th grade, who moved to Churchill and had a similar class in Churchill as an 8th grader as a fourth period student. So now the same group of students were in first period at Hammersholt and fourth period at Churchill, and vice versa with the green. They were fourth period students at Hammersholt, first period students at Churchill, and so on and so forth with all 6 cohorts. The only group is the green group at the top, where we see any kind of really anomaly. There's about a 4.19% drop for those students that went from fourth period in 7th grade to first period in first grade. And so when we looked at these are math and language arts courses as well. So we looked, they're not exactly the same courses. We looked for the same core academic area. and social studies. Social studies was included as well. And while we acknowledge that it's not the same course, there's different teachers, the rigor at each school could be slightly different, the adjustment to moving into junior high school could be slightly different. Those anomalies have to be factored in, but you can see that it's relatively consistent, first period, fourth period, whether we're looking at any of the cohorts. So we also took a look at, oh, it's just out of order. Now you can verify the numbers I just said to you are actually correct. We looked at Hammersholt over a period from 2010 to 2014. Again, looking at first period to later periods in the day. For Hammersholt, later periods would be period 4, 5, and 5, 6. Again, math, language arts, and no statistical significantly different result. Students perform well in both groups. And you can see the population of students that were actually sampled there. So we believe that sample to be significant. So it appears that, at least for East Brunswick students, the academic performance is not really dependent on the time of day. But we did look at some other things. We looked at transportation. What is it that we could do, or what would be our options if we were to look at the transportation impacts of changing the start time? And so we really began with the premise that some of the studies said the best time to start school for secondary school students was 8:30. So we began with that premise and moved forward from there. And so we have one option that we considered, and that would be flipping our schedule with the elementary school starting first and moving the high school to a later start time. So actually, in a cascading succession, elementary schools or 8 schools would start first, then the high school in Churchill at 8:30, and then Hammersholt later. So the problem with this is the bus start time is at 7 a.m. The students would actually have to be at the bus stop at 6:45 in the morning. So we're talking about students that would have to be out, especially during the winter and during the colder months. Not great visibility, the sun's coming up, conditions where there's ice and snow. It's not the best opportunity for students of that age to be out at the bus stop. And we have no control over the weather or environmental conditions. The other thing is, if you look at dismissal times, the elementary dismissal would be at 2 o'clock. And some of our children are in our after-school care program. The mandatory parent pickup is 6 p.m. for after-school care. So we would have students who potentially would be in after-school care for up to 4 hours in this scenario. So based on those factors alone, we deemed that to be an unacceptable option. So we looked again if we could make another flip, and this was to start Hammersholt earliest, the high school in Churchill next, although we could not tweak out an 8:30 start time, but we got it as close as we could to 8:15, and elementary being very close to where they currently are. We went through these numbers and extensively, and I remember very vividly Beth coming in my office and she said, "It works, it really does work." And then we went through the numbers and we started looking at the dismissal times and realized we need 45 minutes between each of those dismissal times that you see to the far right in order for buses to pick up, drop off students, and go back out and make another run. We don't have that here. We couldn't expand that in this current scenario. And we looked at multiple scenarios beyond this, but these are the two most significant that we wanted to relate to you in this report. And when I tell you we did this many, many times, these were many versions of this done over the period of about 4 or 5 days. So we are in a situation where these two are not going to work the way they are currently laid out. Other potential issues regarding transportation would be the timing of athletic events. Students who go to vocational schools, students who are in co-op job situations. We found that the buses for field trips would have to return to the district by 1:45 in order to be available for the bus runs in the evening based on a new revised start time procedure. And if we were to change the bus routing, we discovered that we may have to rebid all of our contractor routes. And in any scenario that we looked at, we determined that there are going to be additional buses and drivers that will be required to accomplish this. The next thing we did was we looked at some non-academic high school impacts. And we don't have slides to represent these, but I'll just give you the information. Some of the studies talked about sleep deprivation. So we looked at our own student body. In 2014, 32 students, or about 1.5% of the population, were actually seen for sleep deprivation issues. But there were other factors such as anxiety and depression that may have an impact on the number of students that reported sleep deprivation. Automobile accidents. In some of the studies, it was reported that students who get more sleep are less likely to have auto accidents. We took a look back at 2014. East Brunswick Police Department reported that our 17 and 18-year-olds did not have any more accidents in the morning than they did in the afternoon. So with that said, changing start times would impact extracurricular activities, student jobs, staff after-school jobs, co-op students who work in the community, and students who attend vocational school. Ending school as late, or at least the high school as late as 3:16, would have an impact on athletics. At least now in the conference, most of the competitions are expected to start at 3:45, and many of the facilities do not have lights. And then, of course, we always have the issue of student events. If the school's going later and events are going later and students are actually driving later at night and getting home later at night. So, in a brief conclusion for this executive summary, based on an objective review of the East Brunswick Public Schools students' academic achievement, we see no educationally significant difference in the performance of students at the earliest period of the instructional day as compared to their peers later in the day. Additionally, other factors such as transportation, extracurricular activities, athletics, and childcare would be impacted by a change in start time. Presently, logistical and financial roadblocks will prevent the implementation of a later secondary start time. Thank you. Any questions?
Thank you. Any questions? I guess not.
All right.
I
thank you.
appreciate all that work, Dr. Oleski and Ms. Warren.